The Seventh Victim from 1943. This is one of those movies that I have gotten low-key obsessed with. I've watched it twice in the last couple of days, but every time I think I understand it, it slips away from me again. But I really wanted to tell you about it, so I wrote down most of what I was thinking, and I'm going to more or less read it to you because otherwise this isn't going to get done. Official synopsis. As stated by HBO and TCM, a girl's search for her missing sister puts her in conflict with a band of Satanists. Disclaimer. The Seventh Victim is listed under horror and also is newly uploaded to the TCM hub of HBO, so I was drawn to it. Having now been compelled to watch it twice in search of clarity, I find myself even more drawn to it, though it leaves me with some feelings of frustration. I got the sense very early in the film that this was one of those movies that was written in a sort of code to get around the censors. Even though I did not know exactly what was being encoded, I could just tell right away that this movie wasn't about what it was about. Now, I think a movie can, in fact, have a sell-by date, an idea I've never really endorsed before, but it all depends on how clearly the point of the movie was made to begin with. Simply put, I'm at a disadvantage here, 80 plus years in the future, because I don't know how things would have been implied to a 1943 audience, and I have not been raised with the same taboos that would even make implication versus explication necessary in the first place. But I do want to state for the record that I am not one of those people who throws out all black and white movies on principle. I'm willing to put in the work to understand something that is encoded, especially a work of fiction that affects me emotionally the way that this one has. And it didn't make me sad, it made me angry. And I had to think about that. However, with The Seventh Victim, I'm impeded by the triple whammy of outdatedness, deliberate obscuration of themes, and plain old bad editing. Unofficial synopsis. Mary is a young orphaned woman, age not stated, attending a boarding school her sister Jacqueline pays for. I got the sense Mary is a minor child. Her headmistress calls her into the office to tell her that her sister has long since stopped paying and also has disappeared. And the only other contact, Jacqueline's co-worker, is being unhelpful. And you have no idea at this point how unhelpful this woman can be. Mrs. Reddy. Mary is given two choices: stay at the boarding school and attend on a work-study scheme, or be advanced the money to go to the city and look for her sister. I have a bad habit of referring to people by their relationship and not their name, even when I'm talking in real life. And I've read that this is an unconscious distancing technique. Now, I did not like the character of Jacqueline, and the name Jacqueline is hard to type, and it's hard for me to say. But I'm going to try. Mary does go to the city, and said coworker Mrs. Reddy is indeed unhelpful. But she's not a coworker. She has bought Jacqueline's business, which might be a perfume factory and might be a salon. It's better if I don't point out these inconsistencies because it's going to take up too much time. Another employee, Frances, who is previously known to Mary, says she's seen Jacqueline at an Italian restaurant. The restaurant owners, after some back and forth, show Mary to a room Jacqueline has rented from them upstairs. But there's nothing in the room but a noose and a chair. The police aren't much help, but there's a private detective at the Missing Persons Bureau who wants to help in exchange for 50 of Mary's American dollars. That's another thing I do to distance myself. I put movie references where they don't go. In this case, Olga from Suspiria's $50 dialogue. $50 in 1943 is almost $1,000 in today's money, so Mary doesn't have it, but she says she's going to get a job. Now, this private detective mentions looking in the hospitals and morgues. So Mary goes to the morgue without hiring him and finds out that a man named Mr. Ward is also looking for her sister. Would you believe that he's played by Hugh Beaumont, who is best known to me as TV dad Ward Cleaver? Cleaver, but both characters having Ward in their name is only coincidence. Ward is an attorney, and he's secretly Jacqueline's husband, meaning that he doesn't tell Mary that he's her brother-in-law. And he starts immediately falling in love with her, which, since she's a child, would make him her ward if they go together. But I don't know if that's, intentional either. He is Jacqueline's husband, but there seems to be no love between Ward and Jacqueline when we eventually do find her. And after we find her, 3 times we find her because she keeps disappearing again, the movie spirals into even less of a story and more of a feeling. 2 feelings for me. The frustration which plagues me in daily life because I have a low frustration point, apparently, as well as a ghoulish desire to see what will happen next and then see it again. How many horror fans also experience a low frustration point? Is this endemic to our breed? I love spoilers because they reduce my feelings of stress, but if you don't, then listen no further. I would like to climb high in a tree. I could be happy. All of these things I do to get away from you. Going back to my certainty from the beginning that this story is not what it appears to be at all, I have found that critics agree that this is a film about homosexuality, specifically the relationship between Jacqueline and Francis, remember the employee who started Mary on the trek to the Italian restaurant at the beginning of the film. Francis, though, along with Miss Reddy, is also part of the cult. Now, the fact that this is supposed to be coded about homosexuality makes me wonder if the marriage between Ward and Jacqueline was what I think they called a lavender marriage, what we now would call a mixed orientation marriage, in order for both to appear to be straight. But then why would Ward not just tell Mary that he was her brother-in-law? I also realized once learning about the film being gay-coded that there's a scene right at the beginning in which the assistant to the head mistress tells Mary to leave the school and never come back because Mary has been told that she can always return to the school. The assistant, whose name is Miss Gilchrist, explains that she herself was an orphan who tried to make her way in the world after leaving that same school, but was not brave enough and came back, and now she can't leave. Is Miss Gilchrist stuck at the school because she's institutionalized? In other words, not psychologically strong enough to exist outside the structure of the school that raised her? Or is she in a power-imbalanced sexual relationship with the head mistress, Miss Lowood? It is important to point out that later in the film, Mrs. Reddy breaks into Mary's apartment while Mary is in the shower and tells Mary to leave, to stop looking for Jacqueline and go back to the school, which I believe is a deliberate callback to Ms. Gilchrist's warning. Now, imagine it's a terrible thing to do in today's society to walk into somebody's apartment and break into their bathroom and talk to them through the shower curtain while they're naked. But this would have been absolutely scandalous in 1943. She's gone into her apartment. She's verbally abusing her. Mary is in the shower, naked and vulnerable. But is it gay-coded? Is Miss Reddy a predatory lesbian? I don't like the fictional idea of predatory lesbians, but such a character seemed to thrive in the fiction of the 40s and 50s and the 60s and beyond, and it feeds into people's homophobia. Enough for these scenes to possibly be coded. There's also a sort of overbearing, predatory lesbian in The Uninvited, 1944. Another theme that comes up when depicting lesbians in older media is suicide. See also The Children's Hour and The Fox. Jacqueline eventually makes use of the noose and chair in her rented room, unfortunately, but it's not explicitly due to her relationship with Francis. Instead, it's because she's in a cabal of Satanists, which includes Francis and Mrs. Reddy, and the cult tells Jacqueline she has to kill herself because it's in the rules. The rules of the cult say that anyone who betrays them has to commit suicide. People just do what Mrs. Reddy says in the universe of the seventh victim, which is one of the sources of my frustration. Jacqueline is the seventh victim of the title. 6 other people have betrayed the cult. They're a non-violent cult by rule unless someone betrays them, which Jacqueline has done by seeing a psychiatrist. See also The Sopranos. The other source of my frustration is Jacqueline herself. First of all, she has stupid, tiny, short bangs with dyed black hair, and tiny bangs make me irrationally angry. They really do. Jacqueline allows a shadowy group of religious fanatics to dictate she should abandon the child she's responsible for. She displays no more concern for Mary than the clippings swept up from the floor of the hair salon/perfume factory she owned. I know it's supposed to be because she's depressed, and her fate is telegraphed right from the opening of the film. Before we even see any characters, we see a card with part of a John Donne sonnet. I run to death, and death meets me as fast, and all my pleasures are like yesterday. We hear this line also spoken by a woman's voice as the last bit of dialogue in the film also. So are the Satanists symbolic of depression or of the fear of one's homosexuality? I genuinely don't know. What I do know is that I liked Mary as protagonist when she was off and out into the world to solve a mystery, although I guess the mystery got subverted. At the very beginning, she's going up the stairs at the office while all her classmates are going down the stairs. We hear a girl's voice conjugating the Latin verb to love, and we hear another voice conjugate the French verb to search after Mary leaves the office, so determined to find Jacqueline. Then we hear a voice recite part of the poem The Chambered Nautilus by Oliver Wendell Holmes Sr. Build thee more stately mansions in my soul as the swift seasons roll. This poem evidently compares the spiral of a nautilus to personal growth, which Mary is approaching. But the story soon becomes less about Mary and more about Jacqueline, who is not written or acted in such a way as to inspire. And Mary's story becomes more about whether she will choose an ill-advised relationship with her brother-in-law or with a poet, who I forgot to mention, who also takes on the role of a private detective. Is Jacqueline also a symbol of something Mary hopes to attain with a girlish and naive view of what life is like? We know that Mary admired her sister, but also found her careless. Careless doesn't even begin to describe giving away a successful hair factory, cutting your hair in tiny bangs, abandoning your family, and joining a satanic cult. No, I tell myself this movie can't be about anything but the seemingly irrational way a person behaves while in the depths of a major depression, behavior which seems so frustrating to the ones who love them, and yet is perfectly reasonable to the sufferer themselves. And I need to learn to have more empathy for depressed characters in films. Mary does find work as a kindergarten teacher. Confusion. Isn't she a child herself? And is at one point seen teaching her students the English nursery rhyme Oranges and Lemons, which includes the line, "Here comes a candle to light you to bed. Here comes a chopper to chop off your head." But I'm not going to even attempt to unpack something that probably deals with English politics of the 18th century. I just thought it went well with the dank nature of the film, and so I pointed it out. 2 more things I observed. It's very convenient to completely obscure yourself in shadows in a black and white movie. It must have been really hard to play hide and seek before the world was in color. Also, there is a moment when the psychiatrist says to the poet, after Jacqueline is found for the 3rd time in the film, as the poet and the psychiatrist have been working together to sort of help Mary in regards to their own association, to me, this seems to be the end of a delightful relationship. Is this a deliberate play on the beginning of a beautiful friendship line at the end of Casablanca, which came out the year before? If so, it might be the only humor in the film, aside from the Italian restaurant owner's repeated assertion that the poet is in fact a very funny man. The 7th victim might suffer from what Mike and the Bots in the Mystery Science Theater riff of Overdrawn at the Memory Bank pointed out, and that movie does heavily borrow from Casablanca, that you should never mention a good movie in your bad movie, or good poetry, or bad nursery rhymes. The 7th victim is not a bad movie, but a deliberately and accidentally confusing one, and yet somehow one that I won't be able to forget.